ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This episode, we are talking the big Marvel sequel, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Hey, but before we talk Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, if you haven't
Black
already
Panda?
subscribed... Did I say Black Panda?
Yeah, now that would be a good
Shoot.
movie.
Yeah. Hey, but before we talk Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, it'd be a great favor to us if you went ahead and did that. And while you're there, go ahead and hit the little bell. That way you're notified every single time a new video uploads. And just as a reminder and a spoiler alert, we do contain all the little details about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. James?
Yeah, when it comes to Marvel movies, I think people are particularly spoiler sensitive. But
Yes.
this is what we do around here, and so there are spoilers to be had, there are cameos to be revealed, there are twists and turns and deaths and all the rest of it, and we're going to cover a fair amount of that, I think. So yeah, where to begin? Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. It's faced with a huge problem right up front, which is the fact that Chadwick Boseman is no longer with us. And that is an obstacle that one way or another the franchise was going to have to deal with sooner or later. And so the way they choose to deal with it is the opening scene. We are told that off screen, T'Challa, Boseman's character, is dying. He has a rare illness. It's not confirmed. It's actually said that it's an unconfirmed or undisclosed illness. And in the first scene, we see Shuri wrestling with her computer system to find a cure. And she runs out of time, and her mother walks in and says, it's too late, we've lost him, leading to a big on-screen funeral memorial tribute that is, that I think actually, to be fair on the movie, does a pretty decent job of exercising and embracing and addressing all of those problems inside the world of the film. And so it gives all of the characters and all of the cast and all of those concerned an opportunity to publicly mourn Boseman's death within the franchise, within the context of the movie and within the franchise. And I think I think it was obviously a sort of a gamble, a risky move, but I think that actually pays off. And I think it's a bold way to start the movie, but I think it's actually quite a powerful way to start the movie.
For me, sadly, that powerful beginning, which I totally agree with, never quite achieves those heights for the rest of the film. I was so invested in that first few minutes. Like you said, I thought they did it really well. They had a difficult waters to navigate here, and I thought they did it in such an honoring way of Chadwick Bosman. And, he's such a gravitas. There's such a presence. I love, even as that final scene is wrapping up and the funeral is ending, and then the Marvel Studios emblem comes up and they kind of reimagine the emblem. So you're seeing kind of flashbacks of Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, and you get goosebumps in that moment. You're remembering how much in just a short span of time this character impacted the Marvel universe. Sadly for me, the problem is they chose, and I realize it's a difficult choice. Do we recast Chadwick Boseman with a different actor and continue on as if nothing happened? Or do we kind of do what they did, not recast, and move on in the story and unfold it the way that they chose to unfold it? The dilemma is this, James, is I found myself asking at the end of this movie, if after 2008's Iron Man, if Robert Downey Jr. had sadly passed away and they had to make a decision about how to continue the franchise, and they said, yes, we are going to continue the franchise. And then Iron Man 2 comes out, and for the first 90% of the movie, there's no Iron Man in the movie. And then at the very end, they put Gwyneth Paltrow in the suit. That's essentially what happens in this film. This is a spoiler. And Shuri, T'Challa's sister, ends up becoming the new Black Panther. And I found myself going, really? The little sister is now Black Panther? And I felt like something is lost in the translation. It's not to begrudge Letitia Wright as an actress. It's just that Chadwick Boseman's embodiment of Black Panther, there was so much gravitas there that to have Letitia Wright jump into that suit, it just does not, it doesn't bring about the same dynamic. And likewise, like I said, if Gwyneth Paltrow's a fantastic actress, but if you put in Robert Downey Jr.'s personal assistant in the suit, there's going to be something lost in the translation. And I felt at the end of this film, it was ultimately underwhelming because Letitia Wright's portrayal as Black Panther cannot measure up with the gravitas that Bosman's T'Challa brought to it.
I agree with some of what you're saying. My issue was not so much about the character of Shuri assuming the mantle, if you like, and becoming the Black Panther, because that does have precedent in the comics. You know, there are times when T'Challa falls in and out of favor with Wakanda's, or he goes off for a long time, and they have to replace him. Because one thing that is repeated over and over again in this film is that they need their protector, and they're vulnerable without their protector. You know, without a Black Panther, which is a hereditary mantle that's passed down from one generation to the next, can be contested, and then and all the rest of it. Then they feel that they are vulnerable to the outside world. My issue was just how long it takes the movie to get around to it, because it's a really long movie anyway. It's about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it spends a good 2 hours of it dragging their heels in an effort to be respectful and not to just have another character jump into the costume and be like, oh, it's fine, Boseman's forgotten, let's move on. What you get is that what you mentioned earlier is that you get a Black Panther movie with no Black Panther in it. And Shuri doesn't adopt the mantle until the final act, the final sort of movie,
the very end of the movie, of the
movie, by which time she's become an increasingly, I think, unlikable character. I think I think she treads a fine line between wrestling with her inner demons, with her grief, with all the rest of it, but by the time she manufactures a new herb that she's able to use, which unlocks the powers of the Black Panther within her, she's actually gone down quite a dark path, and so you're not particularly sympathetic to her position at that time. And so when she takes it on, you're like, well, hang on a minute, is she going to fight for good, or is she going to fight for evil? Because it's revealed that she relates to Eric Killmonger's character as her sort of mentor in the afterworld realm, or whatever that is that you go to when you first take the drug, and that's an issue. What I would have liked to have seen is that they had hurried all of that up so that moment happens like an hour into the movie or halfway through the movie, so that she can go on the same journey. She can wrestle with, am I going to use these powers for good or ill? Why is it that my motivations align more with my uncle and not with my with my brother, sorry, or with my cousin, or whatever he would have been, Killmonger, and have her go through that journey and then come out the other end having resolved that situation. Whereas instead, she does it all before she takes on the role, and so you just don't get enough Black Panther. And I think it would have been more potent if she already had those powers and had assumed that role, and she's still unsure as to where she's going to go with it and how she's going to use it. And the result of that is you've got like this sort of 2 hour section, the majority of the movie, where there's no Black Panther. You've just got a lot of very sad people getting increasingly sad, getting slowly killed, and more people die in this one. And you're left going, okay, fine. I understand that you had some issues to address in this movie, and I don't want to be insensitive because I think that they do a great job of addressing them and handling all of that. But get on with it. Because at the end of the day, this is a superhero movie, and there are certain obligations that it needs to make. Yeah,
I had no idea that the tagline "Wakanda Forever" was foreshadowing the feeling I would have in this movie about when it's going to end, because it is too long for the story. I'd say I agree with you that if she had dropped into Letitia Wright's character, Shuri had dropped into the Black Panther character earlier, it would have made for a better movie. But be that as it may, I still feel that T'Challa was such a grounded individual. He was such a center of gravity. When you could think of him, this man is a protector of his people. It's not that Letitia Wright's motivations are any less. She definitely would want to protect, but she's too conflicted. She hasn't sorted out her own identity yet. And I find that less compelling as a protector. Yes, there's certain characters that lends itself to that we can relate to, because we all struggle with identity and our place in our society and all the issues that she's dealing with. But when we're talking about Black Panther, the protector, I want those issues to already be sorted out, and then they are the protector. And that's why, in hindsight, after watching this film, I'm wondering if it wouldn't have been a better decision to find a really solid actor with gravitas to assume the role of T'Challa and acknowledge Chadwick Boseman in a different way. But I'm not so sure this is the best way forward for the franchise.
Okay, interesting. I'm not going to agree with you about that. That
Okay.
they should have recast the role. I like the idea that the film is dealing with this, with the fact that he's died, with passing on the mantle. Obviously it's a huge sort of real world tragedy what happened, and that obviously their plans would have not been the same had Chadwick Boseman lived.
Yeah.
They may have explored the passing of the mantle, but I think it would have been more aligned with how it happens in the comic books, where it's a temporary fix to the problem that he's away for extended periods of time, or he's falling out of favor with the Wakandans or something like that. And I think they may have flirted that with in the second or third movie, but we will never know. So my issues weren't really. So as soon as I knew they were making a second one without Boseman and they weren't recasting the role, I knew where they were going to go with it in terms of which character was going to assume it, because
the poster kind of lends.
Well, sure, and as I've said, it does have a precedent in the comic books, and although the Marvel movies plot their own course, they do draw heavily major sort of story beats and what have you. So it was more a case of how they went about it, and I think that there is, dare I say, a case for being too respectful and too long a period of mourning playing out on screen in real time. Absolutely. That you're just like that. I just felt like, okay, you've made your point, you've done it well. There's no reason to now do another hour of that, essentially.
Right.
I understand that what we haven't done actually is laid out the sort of the bare bones of the plot, because other stuff is going on simultaneously. Right. Suffice to say that Wakanda and everybody who remains there is, blindsided by the death of their king, and wrestle with it for most of the movie.
It's like the Kennedy assassination. It has such an impact on the psyche of the nation that you spend so much of the movie dealing with the psychic or the psychotic impact that it's had on Wakandan society.
Yeah, that's a really good parallel to draw, because obviously that was a sort of a young, iconic, popular, leader who was then cut down in his prime.
That's why I get paid the big bucks, man, to make those connections.
I'm forever in your shadow.
Forever.
So Wakanda. just to lay out the bare bones of the plot. So after the death of T'Challa, his mother Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, assumes the throne. And they agree to open up Wakanda and Wakandan tech, and specifically vibranium, to the rest of the world. However, she is taken to task by the UN that it has been a year since they promised that they would do this, and that they have not done it, and they are sort of reneging on their deal somewhat. They are having second thoughts. And particularly Ramonda, now that she is the queen, is very reluctant to hand over vibranium to first world powers, specifically the US. Nevertheless, the fact that they have sort of come out into the light and exposed themselves to the world angers another nation, a nation that we were unaware of, which is a sort of a secret ancient underwater civilization, something like Atlantis, but with Mesoamerican inflections instead. It's called like a Tenoch or something like that. I will look it up in a second and insert it in here. But they are the other nation that we are aware of that subsists on vibranium, and their resources, their stashes of vibranium are now being plundered by a sort of drilling operation, a US drilling operation in the ocean, which kind of impedes on their land, and they realize that the person responsible for this, although it's a US operation, the person responsible for this is the scientist who designed the machine that finds vibranium, which is a bit of a leap. It's a bit of a logic jump. It's like, surely
there's a bit of a metaphor in the real world about nuclear proliferation. Essentially, only certain nations can have these really powerful weapons, and we can't.
Sure.
We will exert whatever force is necessary, even lethal force, to contain the use of these types of, well, in this case, the resource, but the parallels are there.
But the fact that they decided to go after the scientist who created the machine rather than the nation that is now using it to mine their vibranium reserves seems a little strange, not least when it is uncovered that the scientist responsible is a teenage girl living in Chicago, I think, called Riri Williams, played by Dominique Thorne, and the king of this nation, who is called Namor, who is a very famous character in the comic books as well, the Submariner, essentially Marvel's version of Aquaman, if you like, the equivalent thereof, comes to Wakanda and says, you have to hand over this scientist. Otherwise, we're going to go get them, and then we're going to take over we're going to invade the world, and we're going to start with you. So the Wakandans are forced to go find the scientist, essentially, and bring them back safely, hand her over to Namor. Otherwise, the whole world's going to go to hell. And this happens in the midst of them reeling with all the issues that they've been reeling with. And so Okoye and Shuri head off sort of undercover to the US to try and find her. And suffice to say, it doesn't go smoothly.
No, not at all. James, Angela Bassett, for me, became the new T'Challa character. I don't know how you felt, but she, more than Letitia Wright's character, and this is the problem I had that I stated earlier, was Angela Bassett now kind of embodied that gravitas that the nation needed. For me, she was the person who, she should have been the Black Panther. I know at her age she can't be the Black Panther, but she has the personality. And I wanted to just have as a caveat, when I was making my allusion to the Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man and Gwyneth Paltrow, I wasn't suggesting a woman couldn't play Black Panther. I was just suggesting that the character couldn't fill the shoes. The Angela Bassett character could fill the shoes. In the movie, I felt the most emotional impact when she passes away.
Okay, that's interesting, because I felt that she was, I really enjoyed her performance, and I really liked the way that she projected her grief and her resilience simultaneously. The weight of the crown felt heavy, and the responsibility that had fallen to her, that she thought was her husband's and was then her son's, and she thought it was going to pass on like that. I really liked the way that she sort of stepped up and took charge. By the time she died, however, I was like, oh, does this family really need another death?
Yeah.
And I was a bit like, oh, come on, now.
I don't think she needed to die. I thought maybe Angela Bassett just wanted out of the franchise, because I didn't see any real need for her death.
I don't think that the actors are motivated that way, that they want to be written out, that they want to be killed off, because it's a good steady paycheck for pretty easy work, I think, if you're not one of the leapy, jumpy, spinny characters, which he's not, as for reasons we've discussed. I would have just liked that more of her dilemma, more of her the community's inner conflicts would have been with, okay, as you say, she is too old to inherit the mantle, so who is going to inherit it, and when? And I know there is this initial stumbling block of the fact that Killmonger burnt down all their herb reserves, but they do fix that problem. And it's only a very sort of arbitrary time mechanism that's put in place, in order to stall that. It just takes some time for the computer to fix and Shuri together to figure it out. And they've had a year already. That doesn't need to take the whole length of the movie. That could have all happened earlier. And I just wish they'd spent more of the movie with the characters discussing and maybe even competing to become the new Black Panther, rather than avoiding the issue only for a character who, by the time she gets her head around it, has gone too far down a dark path, only to then very quickly see the error of her ways. I just felt that the balance of all of that sort of narrative was quite poorly realized.
Yeah, when she kind of has her come to Jesus moment at the end, where she's not going to mete out justice on Namor, even though she deserves to mete out, and like I'm going to basically put my vengeance aside. Basically, everything, a message that the world should embrace, that we have to put our grievances and our vengeances aside if we're going to get along.
Right, it's hardly a profound message. Yeah,
there was two. I brought up before my faith background, and a lot of cheesy faith movies has dilemma, and then a quick at the end redemption, come to Jesus moment. And that's often what it is criticized for. And I felt that this film had a measure of that, where she kind of had this redemption, this enlightenment, this we have to have the way of peace, but there hadn't been enough of a wilderness experience to justify that kind of experiential ending. And so I felt very underwhelmed. I felt very cheated. Like we just kind of have to, well, we're already 2 hours and 30 minutes into this, and we've got to wrap it up quick. So can you do the vengeance thing where you're going to put it aside and spare his life? And can we get this moving? And it would have been nice to spend the vast bulk of this movie's time, which I felt, as you've indicated, might have spent a little too much time honoring the legacy of Chadwick Boseman, and instead had developed the characters that are actually alive now in this film.
Especially when the movie is trying to do so much else at the same time. I mean, you've got this whole other world that you're establishing, Namor's kingdom, and I thought it was great how they plundered Mesoamerican traditions and influences for that, because they could have, he could have come from anywhere essentially. And I think probably partly inspired by the way DC chose to go with Aquaman. And they were like, yes, let's make him like sort of Polynesian Pacific Islander. Okay, we can't do exactly that, but let's similarly draw from an ancient civilization and for that character. So in terms of the aesthetics and the representation of those characters, I was quite excited and pleased with what they were done, but I found that their whole story and their motivations were weird and misplaced.
Yes,
where he wants to he very quickly targets Wakanda as, you are going to feel my wrath, rather than the US and all these other places that are the ones invading his territory and stealing his vibranium, and are the ones who he's worried about. He's not worried that Wakanda are going to do anything bad with their vibranium. He knows that too well. So it's very odd, or just bad writing, that he targets Wakanda as sort of the bane of this issue. So that kind of irritated me. And then he has a similarly quick sort of final turnaround, as Shuri does, going, oh, you know what, you're actually right, we should probably work together.
It's too quick a wrap up. You're right, the motivations in this film are a little wonky. Why they're doing it is a little bit misplaced at times, and I found a lot of the dialogue problematic. I mean, considering a franchise that is this well done, I'm not to say that there's not moments of humor that kind of worked, and I laughed at a couple spots, and by and large, this is not a bad movie. But for all of the resources that are available to the production team and to the director, I'm just surprised that things weren't a little tighter, that pacing was a little tighter, that dialogue could have been a little snappier, a little more punchy and impactful. By and large, this film just kind of, I was expecting this, and it kind of just hit this, and hence where I'm at now.
I was going to say, what it felt to me like is almost a couple of different movies carrying on simultaneously. Because I think it was obviously decided quite early after Boseman's death that the direction they were going to take with this second movie needed to be one about the community wrestling with this issue. And regardless of how well you think they executed that, and I think we've both agreeing that they didn't exercise it great. I think it seems that rewrites have taken place, which is very normal. It happens all the time, to add some excitement, add some action into this movie. And so it feels like there have been a couple of sort of franchise subplots kind of contractually bolted onto the side of this, like the journey to go and find this scientist who turns out to be the young girl that is going to turn into Ironheart, who already has a new series greenlit for next year on Disney Plus. We need to introduce her and her tech and all the rest of it, and it can't be Stark tech, so it's going to have to be Vibranium Wakanda tech. How is that? So it's almost like her origin story is kind of like smuggled in there. Similarly, you have the whole subplot between Martin Freeman and Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, you know, who are both sort of CIA operatives, and there's a kind of sort of dueling for superiority going on there, as well as some rather odd one-way flirtation from Dreyfus towards him, which is all a bit kind of odd, but that feels like that is only there to further their characters, particularly Dreyfus's character, to make sure that audiences remember her when she shows up later. And I felt none of that was really needed. If they'd stripped that away, had her adopt the mantle a bit earlier, and she can still wrestle with her allegiances while she's honing her skills as the new Black Panther, I thought that would have been more interesting. Given Namor some more, you know, focused agency and fleshed out some of the other characters within his community, within his tribe, you could have spent more time with them as well. Yeah, because there are other characters in there that are relevant and are notable, particularly if they're going to feature these characters again. And it just all felt very kind of lopsided and top heavy to me.
Well, let me ask you, what did you think of Namor, as played by Tenoch Huerta? I agree with you. I would have liked to seen more unpacking of the civilization. They've introduced this new major character. They've introduced this new whole civilization, which is almost a mirror of Wakanda, and yet it felt at times I was giving a cursory explanation and a view hole into this world.
Yeah, I think that's exactly kind of the right way of looking at it, is that it so closely kind of mirrored Wakanda that they felt that they didn't really need to go into too much detail. You know, their histories did seem to align. And I know that what they're saying is, you know, the same but different. And everybody has motivations that adjust from a certain point of view. And, you know, everybody had a mother, and everybody, you know, fights for the good of their people, and everybody has a homeland to protect, and all of these kind of messages that you're like, fine, whatever we may look like or sound like on the surface, we're all the same, and we're all on a level footing. But that was kind of disappointing in a way, because I felt that it didn't need to be so similar, that the film felt justified in giving us this kind of half-baked backstory. Really. And I was like, no, make them more different. You know, where's the infighting there? You know, we know that second in command guy, if you know the comics, that Atuma, or whoever he is, the second in command guy, becomes a major villain and adversary of Namor's in the comic. If you click on his name on Wikipedia, and it comes up with a whole page on this guy is a supervillain, and yet there was nothing of that, not even a whiff of it, not even a suggestion. You know, there's one moment where the girl, who is, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Namor's sister or daughter or whomever, who says, "Are you sure about this? You know, can they be trusted? You know, we need to take care of our own." And he's like, "It'll be fine, just you wait," kind of thing. But it doesn't really go any further than that.
I found, though, just on a technical level, I know that Namor has his little feathers on his ankles, but I found the realization of that on film looked ridiculous to me, like, because he could fly with these little wings, and I don't know why it just looked ridiculous to me, because the whole physics element of it was just completely lost on me. I would have rather them explain that he can fly in another way, he just happens to have these wings. Rather, I know this is a small point, but every time he would come up out of the ocean, and you'd have these little wings that are like this big on his ankle, and somehow he's able to fly with these little wings. It bothered me. What can I say? That shouldn't work.
Yeah, no, I
And
don't
I
think
and I
physics.
should say it just looked ridiculous to me. I thought it looked ridiculous.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, what I will say is that there were definitely times when the movie looked great. And when
Yes.
and I think that the costume, the Oscar-winning costume designs from the first movie have been, wholly honored here. I know it's the same. Ruth Carter, I believe her name, is the same costume designer as the first movie. She does a fantastic job here. You know, I spent a lot of time, probably too much time, marveling at the intricacies of Shuri's various kind of hooded and laced garments that she was wearing. Some of the sort of the warrior outfits that Okoye and Nakia, a character who was sorely wasted, Lupita Nyong'o's character was sorely wasted throughout the movie. But then she turns up in these fantastic outfits. I thought that Namor's outfit, particularly towards the end where he gets the full headdress and everything, I thought that all kind of looked great. And it suddenly dawned on me about halfway through the movie. I was like, the cast here is like, forget the fact that it's 90% either sort of African or Mesoamerican or whatever in origin of all of these performers, but it was about 75% female, and it wasn't an issue. It wasn't a story point. You had Winston Duke shows up, Martin Freeman shows up, and as we've said, obviously Tenoch Huerta shows up, and that's about it as far as male characters, and it's a non-issue. And I thought, well, hey, this is where we can point at the movie and go, well, look how far we've come. And you genuinely have. And I thought all of those influences, be they the South American or Central American influences or the African influences or the amalgam of generations of centuries of all of those things playing together, was brilliantly reflected in the score. Again, it's Ludwig Göransson again, who won an Oscar for the first one. And he's great. He's becoming an increasingly prolific composer. He did the music for Tenet and Turning Red earlier this year and a bunch of stuff. He's becoming increasingly prolific. I thought the score was great, and it was probably the single biggest thing I enjoyed about the movie. Actually, I was like, the music, the music was excellent.
No, it was quite good. And you're right. I've been a little critical of the film, and I need to highlight some of the things I did enjoy. There was some, I'm not a big special effects fan, but there was some stunning visuals of water battles going on and using creatures of the sea, the sea peoples and the groups. I found that done quite well. When Wakanda when the female soldiers would go over on the ropes with their spears and be held by the men up at the top, and they were fighting on the side. I thought that was really well done. Winston Duke, there's some good humor in this when he calls the one female leader, you bald-headed demon, and it's just, I think the whole theater laughed at that. So, I mean, there's definite moments in this film that I enjoyed and are well done. I just think in the end, a 2-hour and 40-minute movie is too bloated for this story. It should have been at least a half an hour shorter, and nothing would have been lost at all.
Yeah, I mean, no, I do completely agree with you. I mean, as good as the music was and the costumes are, they don't paper up the cracks in this movie. That, as I said, it feels incredibly disjointed and unbalanced. It makes too much time for moments, understandably so, that just don't work played out on screen in real time. You can't spend that much time moping around, being respectfully mournful in a movie that has demands, and you can, and you're doing it at the expense of potentially really interesting character development.
A question I asked you when we left the theater last night, and I've been mulling over it, is I would have liked in the film, either in the first film or the second film, to give us a philosophy of Wakanda that has given them this enlightenment, this progressiveness, this holistic way of looking at the world, which I think people are drawn to. I think people want to live in Wakanda. We look at Wakanda and we think this is where humanity kind of needs to be going. And yet the only reason that they give for the development of this culture is that they have vibranium. And I'm just thinking around the world, obviously vibranium is supposed to be a metaphor for maybe oil or rare earths or some other, resource that the whole world, needs. And, I've just never seen where access to a particular resource has ennobled a culture and made them progressive and holistically minded. So it would have been interesting to see. I mean, I know this is a thought experiment, maybe outside the parameters of deep dive movie reviews, but I would love to see what is the philosophical and religious underpinning of Wakanda that gives them this, because surely just having a resource is not the end all and be all of your culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's what can you say? I think the way that it's put forward is that because they were a culture built on vibranium, that they have want for nothing, and so they had an opportunity just to sort of evolve within themselves and to respect their identity. There was no economic imbalance or war or anything like that. They were able just to be wholly respectful from day one. But I don't think in the real world, cultures unfold that way.
No.
They just don't. There's always somebody that just wants more of it for themselves and what have you.
Well, James, as we wrap up our review of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, we need an instrument. What are we going to use here?
I think we need beads. The vibranium beads.
Vibranium beads. Yeah. Let's vibranium beads. How many vibranium beads are you going to give Wakanda Forever?
Okay. I mean, this is difficult, and I think a lot of people are going to come at this from different angles, and I think that there's a lot of goodwill. This, being bestowed upon this movie, being projected onto this movie. I came to this movie with an open heart and and all the graciousness in the world and what have you. And I was fascinated to see what they were going to do and how they were going to tackle this hugely tragic issue that there was no way of sidestepping. I think the intention is all there. The intention on screen to really address it and be as respectful as possible. And you cannot really hold it against these people involved too much because they knew him and all the rest of it. But I feel that it goes overboard. I feel it, as we've said, it spends far too much time on the mourning of T'Challa and not enough time exploring how moving forward impacts these characters. And I think there was so much more they could have mined from that. And I think it really came at the expense of some good storytelling. And I think too many characters, not least Nakia, Lupita Nyong'o's character, fell by the wayside as a result. And then so it meant that everything else that was being added on just felt Frankensteined onto this project that was not living up to its obligations as an MCU movie. And so what you're left with is something that is that begins strongly and very emotionally, but very quickly starts plodding and becomes unfocused and unstructured and falls apart and gets distracted too easily and never quite brings the level of gravitas and weight to its story that it wants or that it believes it is. So I came away tired and frustrated and disappointed. I have to say, there were lots of individual little technical aspects that I appreciated, as I said, the costumes and the score, but in the end, I don't think it's a film I'll watch again. I might wheel round to it once more when it's on Disney Plus just to see if it's still as disappointing as it is. But right now, I'm actually very disappointed with the film and I don't need to go into the reasons why again. So I think at the moment, I'm going to give it 2 out of 5.
I'm pretty much with you, James. I thought for 2 hours and 40 minutes, there's not enough meat on this bone to justify this length. And too often there was scenes of dialogue that I thought were uninteresting and not moving the story forward very well. And so I just found things were disjointed for the very reasons you said. Because this is not a movie unto itself, but it's part of a bigger universe of which they have to have little umbilical cords into things that some viewers might not even understand. Why are we learning about this? Why is this happening? What does this have to do with the central premise of this film? You're just left with a big, bulky, unwieldy film at times. And it would have been much better served to be trimmed down, focused, and just give us a really strong story, which I think it's in there somewhere. They just need to go through and edit it out again, because it's to me, it needs a good edit. Anyhow, you have 2. I'm going to be a little more generous. I've always said 3 is my threshold to recommend you have to go see it. I don't think people have to go see this, but there are aspects about it I did enjoy. I can give a half, so I'm giving it 2.5 vibranium bracelets out of 5.
All right.
Well, that's James and I's review of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. We know it's a little controversial. There's a lot of people who love the MCU. They love Black Panther, and they're going to be disappointed with maybe James and I's recommendation here. But let us know how you felt. Do you disagree with us? We'd love to engage with you on it. Feel free to leave your comments in the description boxes below. James?
Yeah, absolutely. I always enjoy hearing from people who disagree with me, as long as it's intelligent and respectful. I hope that we, even though we didn't like the film, have managed to remain respectful and to the film and to those involved, and obviously to the memory of Chadwick Boseman. This is by no means a slight on anybody there. I just didn't feel that the end product lived up to the standards by which its predecessors, not least the first film, have been held. But until then, we'll see you next
Until
time.
then, we'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
We're going to see them in the next episode?
We'll look forward to seeing them coming and seeing
No,
us.
but they will see us. We won't see them.
You know, we look forward to seeing you. You know, that's what on TV shows, when they say, we look forward to seeing you next. Of course, yeah, they're not going to see me living in my living room.
Okay.
Anyhow,
that was great. Did we actually finish?
We did.
You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.